Okay, welcome back to episode 18 now of Ag Inspire Conversations. My name is Tommy Heffernan. The concept's very simple. It's to have interesting conversations with people doing inspiring things in agriculture. And my next guest certainly ticks all those boxes. A wife, a mammy, she's been awake all last night with a little teething baby, a solicitor, a tax consultant, a Nuffield scholar, and somebody who's now an advocate who is got a campaign called Understand Agriculture. First and foremost, good morning, Aisling.
Morning, Tommy. How are you?
Very good, very good. Thanks very much for having this early morning discussion with me. It was a busy night for you last night in your household?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. In fairness, Holly's the youngest. She's 10 months and she's just a dream baby. Like if Carlsberg did babies, it'd make baby Holly. But she's teething at the moment. So we're 12, 2, 4, 6, and I'd be kind of a light sleeper. So once I'm awake, I'm kind of tossing and turning. But anyway, listen, it's fine. It's only once in a blue moon. So be tonight. I'll probably go to bed early now tonight. But apart from
very good. Aisling, you're somebody. Look, I've had a few conversations with you. I know you through Nuffield as well, obviously, but certainly the idea of these conversations was to talk to inspiring people, and I think you tick all the boxes there. And I think it was brought home to roost again when I watched you on the Ireland's Farmers account for the week, and you know, I always tip in and out of that account, but that week I was glued to catching up every week to what you were doing, talking about your farm, your own history and how you got involved with farming. Your dad was a bit of a phenomenon on it as well for the week. But tell people who you are first and foremost, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose like I'd always kind of introduce myself as a farmer first and foremost. When I was growing up, I suppose both my mother and father were very strong advocates of either trying to make a life out of the farm or indeed make a life out of rural Ireland. And that's something that I kind of felt everyone in the ag industry knew that about my background, but that was the one eye-opener I got from doing the Ireland's Farmers Weeks, that a lot of people didn't make the connection between my mum and my dad and myself. And that history, and that people kind of, a certain amount of people would know me for being me, just I suppose, and then other people would always have that connection. Like we have a joke at home that, you know, when I was starting out, it was always, oh, you're Liam Meehan's daughter. And then now we have the crack that someone would meet my dad and they go, oh, you're Aisling Meehan's father. So, but like that definitely will say the part of like farming and all that would have come from mum and dad. So I suppose just briefly, just to give an overview, we'll say I did the Ireland's Farmers Week, and I suppose I just wanted to bring something a little bit different. So I just wanted to tell the story about, would say, when I was growing up, and, you know, it was always very important. What I loved, I suppose, is living on a rural farm and then seeing what was going on. And like, I think I got a very strong work ethic. We'll say my mum and dad started out, you know, very humble beginnings, as it is on many Irish farms. There was about 60 acres in the home farm. My grandparents were quite elderly when they had my dad and the kids. So that my grandparents, my father would say it was more like his grandparents rather than his parents. So he left school at, I think he claims it's 11 and a half, that can vary. And he started farming, and then would say he met my mum and he was in his early 20s, and my mum was a bit of a rebel as well at the time, and like she was the youngest of 9, so like she packed in her job and she went off. Like she tells the story, she was doing hotel management, and she just packed in the job and she went off. She jumped up in a 35X and went off spreading fertilizer one morning, you know. She said to hell with it. So like they had nothing, and like they pulled in a mobile home into the farm, which again, you know, you can imagine back in the late 70s, early 80s in Ireland was not the done thing to do. And they moved in beside my granny and granddad, and they had 3 of us in a mobile home. And like that always when I think of that, like it was always, you know, when I think of now that I have my own kids, and I'm sure yourself, Tommy, that, you know, it's challenging when you have young kids and you're trying to juggle work and you're trying to juggle keeping the house going. But to think of my mother in a mobile home, where often she said, like, in the nighttime, she'd leave the dishcloth would be on the sink. And when she'd come up in the morning, it would be standing upright from the frost and from the cold. And she'd 3 young kids and she'd cloth nappies. So I always think that if she could hack it, for want of a better phrase, and she was able to get through that period, and she would often say that that was some of her happiest times, that I say, what challenges do we have when we have all the modern luxuries of life at the moment? So I always remember, like, my upbringing, I remember childhood was always a very happy time. when I went, you know, mum and dad would drop me to school. It could be in a tractor. We're often late because, you know, they would have been down doing the milking. And by the time they'd have a round done and they'd clusters, my mum would be running up, like used to call her, she was on 2 wheels constantly. But we'd, you know, she'd drop us off to school and then we'd say collect us from school, and they were always there. Mum and dad were always there. So even though they weren't like, you know, they're sitting down with you, they were always doing something or busy. But I loved that part of growing up. And that was something I always wanted, you know, if I was lucky enough to have my own kids, I always wanted to be around. And that if they felt, you know, if they could come with me wherever I was going or whatever I was doing. So that would say farming, you know, would say I have 2 brothers then that are full-time farming. My younger brother, he chose something different. He's doing construction management, but I still think brings a lot of kind of the farming, rural Ireland ethic into what he's doing. He's in Miami. But as I said, my brothers are full-time farming. And then, you know, I suppose I was kind of the bookworm, always was. Just, I don't know, just that was the way it was. It certainly wasn't my mum and my dad, like to the extent that my mother locked me out of my bedroom as a child because she said I was studying too much, and she maintained that I wouldn't have a personality. So, you know, that was a huge part of it for my mum and my dad. Like, you know, they were kind of, to me, they were saying, oh, you're too academic, you won't be able to hold a conversation. So get out and get mixing with people. And when we were growing up, there was a natural lake on the farm, and we developed that and put rowing boats on it. And I was kind of sent down there for the summers to try and smarten me, was the words that they used to use. And it was a great learning experience because you were dealing with people. And, you know, I suppose that kind of, in a way, like, it kind of gave me a bit of the, you know, business savvy, and dealing with people, because you deal with people every day. So that's kind of a lot of my background in a nutshell.
There's some magical wisdom in there. Thinking about the mobile home, and to some people that would sound like maybe hardship, but you said your mother said it was some of the happiest times of her life. And, you know, I see it myself, you know, everybody around me is busy. I'm busy. We're all going so fast. We have nice things and nice house, but sometimes it's those really important small things that people don't appreciate that you can have maybe anywhere. You know, like just that family time, and those memories are so important that you don't need maybe all those luxuries sometimes for it.
No, I even think, like, you know, I have a big thing about Christmas, like, and absolutely love Christmas. I got married at Christmas. Like, it's such a magical time. But it, like, again, I think it goes back to the childhood. And like, it was just small things that I remember, like that my mom, you know, she might get a new mat for in front of the fireplace, or we might get a new set of pajamas. Like, I never remember what Santa Claus brought me, and it was probably, you know, whatever it was, something big at the time. But it was those small little things. It was like, you know, getting the ham ready the night before. We used to go see Santa Claus every Christmas Eve. Dad would bring us. And like, it didn't matter what was on. Like, one year he had an abscess in his tooth. Another year, I don't know, he did something to his finger. And like, you could see he'd be pale in the Santa photo. But that was just the thing. And we always knew when you just be wild with excitement. So like, they were the simple things. Or the thing like going to the ploughing match. I still remember that vividly. Like, you'd be looking forward to, you'd be sick with excitement. Like, that you'd be getting up and it'd be still dark, and you'd bring the pillow, and you'd be sitting in the back of the car, and you'd all be squished in. And you know, they were like the simple things where you spend time with family. And like, what, you know, my mom and dad, I think because of, like, they had nothing starting out. So I think a certain amount, they had no fear because they had nothing to lose. And then, but at the same time, they had an awful lot to prove. And I think we'll say that really stood to me down the line when I was in Dublin. So I was working in a corporate firm. And I was working in financial services, tax, essentially. So there was William Fry is the name of the firm in Dublin, and they gave out one apprenticeship whereby they sponsored you to be a solicitor and also to qualify as a tax advisor. So like, having to pay the fees, and I was getting paid full time as well while I was working. So it was like, wow, the win-win situation. But then the job I was offered then was in financial services tax. And I always knew, obviously, that I wanted to move down the country. So I said, I need to jump ship here, because otherwise it was so specialist that I'd end up in Dublin. And at that point, we'll say, I left Dublin and I moved back and I set up my own practice. But it was kind of, I moved back in with my parents. I had nothing. Like, I was on like mega money at the time in Dublin, because like, it was Celtic Tiger era. but I partied. I had the life of Riley, you know, just went out and like did, you know, whatever about being the bookworm growing up. But I think that was the time then when like I really kind of probably went a bit wild when I was in Dublin, because I had that freedom. But in another way, kind of got it out of my system. But I came home with absolutely not a penny, like, and like that was, you know, that was the time probably when I should have a good thing saved, you know, a good amount saved. But again, like that kind of taught me, like, you cut your cloth according to its measure. And when I moved back in with mum and dad and set up the practice, you know, they have that, you know, you ever see that ad on telly where it's like Colgate, it's an ad for toothpaste or something. And like they have the dentist is like pushing something across the table. They have nothing to do, basically. The idea behind it is because the toothpaste is working. But like I was like that in the office, like literally like twiddling my thumbs going, right, let's think of how am I going to get in work? Because like I wasn't from a legal background, you know. I think like farmers are an incredibly loyal group of people. Like if they've been with a solicitor for years, their attitude was kind of like, well, sure, that solicitor now has been in the family for generations and we've always gone to him or her. So trying to break into that market was difficult. But again, like I kind of went, sure, what have I to lose? You know, what's the worst that can happen? Like I can always go off and get a job if this doesn't work out. But then there was the kind of stubbornness in me as well that kind of said, we'll make it happen. And then you become very resourceful, that you kind of go, okay, you have to push yourself to go, well, and to think about, well, how am I going to get work in? How am I going to try and get this off the ground? What's, you know, I always say to people, what's your unique selling point? So what's different about me than every other solicitor that's out there, and how can I kind of big that up? So that will say, you know, so there was a lot of life lessons there. And I suppose it was only as I was that bit older that you really kind of, I think you take in and you appreciate so much more the kind of things that the sacrifices, I think more so the things that your parents made, and that, you know, that you can learn from it and that you can build on it really and appreciate it.
Why law? Why did you want to get involved in law, or what?
It was a complete random, because it was we'll say basically it was business. It was entrepreneurial. It was business that I loved, as it turned out. And like we'll say, I suppose I was good academically. I was good at the books, as they say, but I studied hard now as well. It wasn't something that it would come naturally to me. So then we'll say I wanted to run a business or own a business or do something entrepreneurial. But then I figured out, well, you need to know about law and tax or accounting or finance. Basically, you need to know a little bit about it to be good at business. That's the way I figured. And then I was looking at business studies, but then I was kind of saying, okay, I could do business studies, but let's do something a little bit different. So there was a course called Law and Accounting in UL. So I did it with the idea that I'd have a grounding in both, but that I'd never actually become either an accountant or a solicitor. And then as it happened, we'll say there's a co-op program in UL. And I was more into the accountancy route than I was the law route. I hated law in college, being honest with you. It was so boring. It was all history and I just had no interest in it. And then, so there was a mix up in the co-op office. Still to this day now, but anyway, and they sent out my CVs to the law firms. And then I got an interview with William Fry. And then I was like, what the hell? Like, I don't want to go into a law firm. And they were like, you go and you sit down for that interview. Do you know how hard it is to get an interview for those places? And this, you know, blah, blah. So I was like, grand, I'll go for the interview. And then when I went for the interview, naturally, I ended up getting the job. And then I got a job in working on kind of conveyancing. So it'd be like land transfers and, you know, that side of the work. But I was working for an incredible lady called Patricia Kenny. And she kind of took me under her wing. And when I worked in law, it was so different from studying it in college. Like, it was so practical. It was very much problem solving, which was actually something that I really enjoyed. So when I worked in it, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I kind of fell into it by accident, really.
And obviously now you're known because of the work with your own practice, particularly in agricultural law. You're the Agrisolicitor, you write in the Farmer's Journal. So what percentage of your work now is in the farming sector? Is it all of that, Aisling? Are you specialising only in
Yeah, 100%, and it has been from the very start. So I'm nearly 13 years now in practice at this stage, and it was something that I said that I would do with the, you know, from the very outset, that I just wanted to work for farmers. So I work for farmers and landowners, nothing outside of it. And I kind of do, it's, you know, I think farming is so much different than any other business. You know, they talk about family businesses or small businesses, but farming is so much different because for a couple of different reasons. One is because I suppose the value of the assets, and from a tax perspective, and there's very generous tax reliefs there for agriculture and farmers. And then it's trying to maximize those reliefs and to make sure that you use them to best advantage. Secondly is around schemes and subsidies. It takes up such it's such an important part of farming these days. Without those schemes and subsidies, a lot of the time there wouldn't be profit on family farms. So it's very important to know the ins and outs of them and to be able to use them again to best advantage. Because I would have learned that growing up, you know, with my brothers and we'll say my parents, that they would have used whatever schemes and subsidies were there at the time in order to grow the farm, to create, we'll say, two viable farm enterprises for both my brothers. You know, they each have their own farms now. And on the other hand, we'll say dad still is on the home farm, you know, when they started out. But it was through using the system, for want of a better phrase, in terms of, you know, getting milk quoted for when my brothers were starting out as new entrants, getting the installation aid. They would have done a lot of qualifying farmers for the early retirement scheme, which enabled them to lease land and build up stock, etc. So I think that's a huge part of it, and it's a big part of my farming enterprise at the moment, is using the schemes. And then the other part, the most important part, is I think in terms of succession and family farm transfers. Like typically when you think about it, where the succession is happening, there could be, everyone is under the one roof. So like often, you know, a solicitor's letter might fly from one office to another office, and like a solicitor will draft it and not think too much about it. But you could have a mother sitting down by the fire at nighttime, reading into every word that's said, going, did he say that? And why did he say that? And why are they saying that? And, you know, that it can cause, you know, tension, and it can cause a little bit of hassle where there shouldn't be hassle at all. Like in my opinion, like farm transfers and succession should be seamless. And I think as solicitors and as professionals, be whoever they are that people rely on, that we should facilitate that, and we shouldn't be there as roadblockers or his side versus her side. That I think you have to be holistic and look at the farm and what's in the best interest of the farm, because ultimately that's what the parents want. It's what's in the best interest of the farm and who's going to bring the farm on in the next generation. It's not raising all these different things that can go wrong. Everyone's going into it wide open as to the risks, but ultimately it's to not cause hassle in terms of transferring the farm onto the next generation. So I suppose I saw a gap in the market. My mum and dad were using a solicitor called Oliver Ryan Purcell, who I have huge admiration for, huge respect for. And only for him, I probably wouldn't have got the start that I did get and was able to build in it. And we'll say Oliver, you know, was one of the first to see, we'll say, you know, woodwork in the area of farming and agricultural law. And I remember when I was leaving Dublin and I handed in my notice, and I had very good rapport with my boss. And I said, I'm going to leave. And he was like, oh, feck. He said, I always knew you were going to do it. And he's like, where are you going? He's like, revenue? Are you going like, you know, one of the other corporate firms? And I was like, no, I'm setting up my own practice. And he was like, what? Doing what? And I said, agricultural law. And he was like, what the hell is that? You know, it was like, what? That's not even a thing, Aisling. Like, and he was kind of like, geez, you're throwing your career away here. And but like now, I suppose that's something that I'd be proud of. Like now they're running a course in the Law Society called Certificate in Agribusiness and Food Law. So they recognize it as a thing now in the Law Society. Like I've been asked to give a couple of CPDs. So I'm recording one out at the end of this week. So it's clusters of solicitors. So they have these CPD clusters around the country. So solicitors kind of ask who they want to come in and give them a talk. So I'm giving a talk. There's one for Kerry, there's one for Cork, there's one for Mayo. So all those solicitors in those counties have asked for me to come in and give a talk about agricultural law. So it's a thing now that like people, you know, respect that working for farmers and farm families is a bit different than other, because like you have business law, you have litigation, you have family law, but like agriculture was never kind of recognized as its own thing in a legal field, whereas now it does, which is something that I am pretty proud of, because I think it's getting the recognition that it deserves.
It's law is minefield in itself, and in agricultural law, there's so many elements to it. But is it succession? Is probably, if you were giving farming families advice, is it that succession piece that's the one that maybe creates a lot of the challenges all the time? Is that where you tell people to focus on? And maybe look, I'm showing my lack of knowledge of law, to be honest with you, but is it succession? Because we hear it time and time again that people need to have a good plan around that.
I wouldn't say, like, no, I love succession. I love that part of the work. Because, like, I feel I can give value. I can give value to it. I can add to the conversation. And I think it's something that I get a kick out of, because generally people are quite open in terms of succession. And a lot of the time they don't know what to do. Okay. Like a lot of the time now, like I have like parents coming to me and they genuinely don't know. And especially if it's a situation where more and more often now that there isn't a successor per se, there isn't a natural successor, because the way farming is going, it's bloody hard, you know, but like you have to know a little bit about everything. And it's really like whoever's willing to put up their hand and to say, I'm willing to take this on. It's not an asset worth $1 million or $1.5 million or whatever it is, because that's only an asset if you sell it. Whereas in my experience, like we'll say the next generation, there's no way that they'd sell the family farm, you know, through their own choice, because like it is something that's sacrosanct, because they have that, I think they have that romantic childhood love of like growing up on the farm and those lovely memories and everything. And I think like they cherish that. So there's a very strong emotional connection to the farm. And generally, like, I don't find too much conflict around succession. There shouldn't be, like, and a lot of it is around communication, that I think that if people are open, and people feel that they have a say in it, that you know, that there isn't that issue. Where I find like the most challenging cases to deal with generally is where there is conflict. So things like rights of way, oh my God, I just despise them. I absolutely despise them, because like these kind of that type of litigation, or, you know, someone fighting over a bull, was the bull fertile or not fertile? You know, I could pull my hair out and going, Jesus lads, it's $1,000, it's $2,000, but no, Aisling, it's the principle of the thing. And I'm going, grand, we can throw letters over and back here. I can clap up a bill of $1,000 or $2,000, but I refuse to do it. So like, I don't take on work unless I feel I can add value to it. Or like would say, you know, if there's a probate, or there's fighting over a will, again, it's very disheartening work, because there's no winners. There's absolutely no winners out of it, because no matter if somebody wins, they still feel aggrieved because they had to go through the process to get where they got. And then obviously the person that's on the other side of it has lost. So there's, you know, for generations to come, there's going to be a wedge there. There's going to be that negativity there. So they're the ones, like that kind of conflict situations, as I said, are the ones, or adverse possession, squatters' rights, those kind of ones. I find those pieces of work now challenging, to say the least. But succession is I enjoy.
Okay, I introduced you to start, and I left out the most important part, probably, that you're a farmer. And maybe I did say it now, but that's the unprofessional person you're dealing with here anyway. But it's very, you can feel that passion every time I talk to you. You can feel it there, that, you know, you keep going back to farming. But you are farming at home. Do you want to tell people about your own farming business? Because you have your law business now at home, but you also are farming at home. Talk a bit about your farming business. Yeah,
our farming business, I suppose. So again, like just... starting out, I would say my mum has land in the Burn. She's about 100 acres in the Burn. And again, would say, I suppose, in fairness, my mum and dad like were very pioneering at the time, because my mum was farming, but she was farming in her own right. So like they would have bought the land in the Burn, and it was bought in my mum's name, and there was a loan taken out, and etc. And then like really then she went in for the schemes. She was in for reps, and she was in for single farm payment, but it was her thing. Like, so she was a farmer in her own right, and my dad was farming in his own right. But they worked together as a team, and each of them had their strengths, and they knew their strengths, and they were an absolutely phenomenal team. So then when, unfortunately, like my mom then was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, in 2012 in August, I was in New Zealand having the time of my life on my Nuffield travels. And it was when I returned home, literally my whole world came crashing down, like to find out that she had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and she passed away the following January. So we'll say at that time then, you know, I suppose there was no real tough conversations had, but as part of it, she wanted the farm in the Burn. Like Mum and Dad obviously discussed it, but she wanted the farm in the Burn to be transferred over to me. And I absolutely love that because, you know, I suppose I wasn't long in, you know, agricultural law, and I'd set up my own practice, but the idea was that I'd have my own piece of land. And I think she knew that, you know, that was kind of the end game, was that, you know, I suppose to leverage the fact that I'd been doing the books and law and whatever to get a piece of land. So I had that then, and I could stand up and be proud to say I actually am a farmer now. I had my own bit of land, I had my herd number, etc. So it's farming in the Burn, as I said, started that in about 2012, and then we'll say so obviously I'd moved back in with Mum and Dad when I set up my own practice. That was in 2008, and then when Mum obviously passed away, so I'm the only girl. And my brothers are living away from home, and my dad was there, but traditional family farm, like my mom did everything, like in terms of cooking and cleaning and all the usual things, you know, and that was just the way things went. So I was living at home, and then it was shortly around the same time I met Brian, my now husband, and he was from Cork by. And but in fairness to him, like, he kind of knew, like he could see the dynamic. So I'd be very close to my dad. I was very close to my mum and my dad, obviously, but because of my mum passing, I suppose I became closer to my dad. And he kind of knew this girl ain't budging. So he was from Cork. So then he kind of said, like, you know, grand, well, sure, I'll move up. So I always had in my head, my granny and granddad's house was next door to my mum and dad's. They're actually connected. So it's almost like a granny flat, but like it hadn't been lived in for years. So then I was like, well, listen, something has to be done to that house. There was no central heating, or else the bloody thing is going to fall down. So I said it to Dad. I said, can I do up Granny and Granddad's house? So they, yeah, grand. So then I said to Brian, I said, well, are you game? Come on, sure, move up. Like, I think he was looking for a job, actually. And he was looking down around Cork. And I was like, well, sure, why don't you look in Limerick? And like, I don't think we're going like 6 months at this stage. And he was kind of looking at me and he was like, I suppose you have a point. Okay, grand. So it was literally like that. And then we just like literally stuck into the house next door, and we did a lot of it ourselves. Like I was borrowing earth out every evening out of the Granny and Granddad's house, and he was kango and hammering like floors. You know, years ago, like the house I think was built in the 18 something. It was a soup kitchen at one stage, but like you go in the door and you'd feel the fall of the floor. You know, so we were just doing basic things like trying to level the floor and put in heating and bits and pieces like that. But we met at our home. It was very comfortable, small little house. And so we lived there for a couple of years, but always kind of had it harboring going, like if we bought a house and a bit of land. So I suppose to fast forward, we were on the lookout for something locally again, I suppose, because just, you know, I just wanted to live around locally. And then this place came up for sale. But just before that, I suppose I was coming towards 35, and as you know, the stamp duty relief. So Brian is 2 years younger than me, so I always say pay to marry a toy boy. But so I said to him, I was like, "There's any chance you do the green cert?" And he's like, "Oh, for God's sake!" He was like, "What am I doing that for?" And I was like, "Well," I said, "if we buy a place, you know, well then it'll help in terms of paying for saving stamp duty." So in fairness, I sponsored him, and he went off and he did the green cert down in Pallaskenry. And like when it came to it, then this place came up for sale. We didn't think so. It's a house on 65 acres, and we didn't think it would be within our reach. But we said we'd have a crack at it and whatever, borrowed as much as we can, and all X, Y, and Z, and came up with our business plan. But then it saved 47,000 in stamp duty by him having done the green cert. Oh. Because he was under 35, we'll say, whereas I was gone over 35 in terms of buying the place. So that was it. So then it was, we'll say, Brian then set him up as a farmer in his own right. So I was farming the Burn, he's farming here. I also have a bit of land lease. So then we went into a partnership. But it's around maximising the different, you know, reliefs and tax that are there. So I'm the old farmer, he's the young trained farmer. So we've gone in for TAMs now. So with the TAMs, you know, as you know, if you're in partnership with a young trained farmer, you can qualify for a 60% grant, and I qualify for a 40% grant. So So, you know, we're doing it as a team and farming together. And, you know, he's loving it now. He's going out and he's a chemical engineer by profession, I suppose. And he was like, God, it's great. He said, Ash, to go out in the evenings and, you know, you're going out changing the heifers. And he said, you know, there's no one talking back at you. Like, you just change the fence and, you know, so it's a great headspace for him as well, getting out, and he really enjoys it.
You seem to be carrying on that tradition of what your mum and dad did in the past, of that team building together, working together. You like, so you're somebody I've met, Aisling, and people will get this, that you're very impressive, you're very driven, you're very focused, you know where you're going. And I think that comes maybe from the upbringing you've had. But you did mention, obviously, the passing of your mum tragically. Like that was a tough time for you, was it? So somebody,
huge.
You know, people see someone like you so driven and, you know, so kind of almost in control. How did you deal with that personally? Was that a real kind of, you know, how did I suppose at a personal level did you get over that? Because you seem to, your mom and your dad have both mentored you. You've been there all your whole life and helped you develop. It's like, how did you get through that yourself?
Huge. It had an absolutely huge impact on me. Like, you know, without trying to get emotional now about it, like, but she was just incredible, you know. And like, I think as well in farming, you know, some people, you know, like obviously fathers or men can get, you know, like they're predominantly farmers, like, but like my mom and dad, like they were a team, like they both, as I said, like they both had strong points and like they actually worked, you know, they worked very well together. And like, that's something that I've kind of learned over the last little while, we'll say, even with myself and Brian, that like we have our strong points and we have our weak points, but we work well together as a team. But we'd say with when Mam was diagnosed, I suppose like just naturally, obviously, when I moved back down from Dublin, my Mam and myself we'd be at loggerheads a little bit when I was younger, because obviously I was very strong-minded. And I see it now with my little lady. I was like, oh my God, it's history repeating myself. But my mum used to send me off for a couple of weeks during the summer, I'd say, just for headspace, because I was very strong-minded, going like, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? But then as time went on, we were just great. And I suppose when I moved back down then, like a lot of my friends were gone. So my mother became my best friend, and she was very young at heart. She'd be the life and soul of the party, like just great crack, but like, you know, very deep and like very popular amongst the local community. And like would be there. And like, as it turned out afterwards, I realized she was there for so many different people. And like, we didn't even know about that, you know, that she was, she was a saint. She's an absolute saint. But anyway, like when she was diagnosed with cancer, as I said, she was my best friend. So I was not only losing a mother, I was losing a best friend. But I come back from Nuffield. And as you know, Tommy, like you're off and you're doing your Nuffield, and like, you are just so full of energy and positivity and you're riding high. And then coming back can be difficult, because I was facing into having to write my report, because I had to give my presentation that January. And then like I came in and I knew immediately there was something wrong, because my mom hadn't been well, but I didn't realize it was going to come to something like this. So that had happened. Then in the meantime, I had been in a relationship. I'd been in a long-term relationship before that, and that finished, whatever. And then it was kind of a short-term thing, but I'd been in a relationship and things seemed to be going well. But around the same time, my mom got diagnosed with cancer. That fell apart. But I subsequently found out he'd actually been two-timing me. Right. So it kind of made sense, because he obviously kind of knew, shit, like her mother is dying of cancer, and he's obviously probably meeting somebody else, so I can't keep this going, this relationship. Okay. So I had that to contend with, that I was a 30-something-year-old, and like I had always in my head, like I obviously quite ambitious, that by the time I'd be 30, I'd have like 4 kids and married and a farm and a house and, you know, a perfect life and all that. Whereas here I was living at home, like facing into writing a Nuffield farm and like the farm Nuffield report, like trying to run a business. And it was just me. There wasn't anyone else in the practice at that time. And my mom and my best friend was dying of cancer. So it was incredibly, incredibly tough time. And I remember like I'd often be out in the office, like, and I could be like just crying for no reason. I remember one day then my dad came in and like whatever, and you're kind of like trying to mask it or whatever. And I was looking down or whatever. And he was like, what's wrong with you? You know, just typical, I suppose, like being, because I suppose the other side of it is like my mom was always the emotional one. I don't know, I think it's Irish mammies. Like if you'd kind of any emotional things, or if, you know, personal kind of problems, you went to my mom and she kind of sorted that. Whereas like business stuff, if you had any business issues, dad was the one that would sort that, you know. Whereas like talking about feelings and that kind of stuff, like dad would be like, geez, no, not having any of that. So there was me crying in the office, but sure, like I couldn't cry with my mom because like she was being a trooper, and I was like, I can't feel sorry for myself because she was being incredibly strong and brave. So I didn't want to burden her more by her seeing me, I suppose, struggling, and she knowing that all this stuff was going on. So then I said, what do you think is wrong with me? And I listed out all the different things that were going wrong. And he said, and he stood there and he just said, well, and excuse what I'm going to say. He was like, well, Aisling, he said, life is so shit for you at the moment. He said, things can only get better. And it was just like the penny dropped. Whatever it was, the penny dropped for me. And I said, you know what? He's right. I just felt like I was so low that everything that could possibly have gone against me had gone against me. And then I was like, you know what? Things can only get better. And it was almost like it just changed. It was my mindset just changed instantly with that. And I said, look, and then like, you know, and I was like, well, look at my mom. Like, she's the one that's actually dying here. And like, she's keep putting out a brave face. She wanted things to just continue on as normal. She didn't want to discuss it. She didn't want to talk about it. I was looking at my dad, like he was losing his best friend, his life partner, like the world revolved, like she was his world. And like, he was still getting up in the morning. He was still doing everything he had to do. So after that, I think there was just a change. Now I remember, I ended up then presenting my Nuffield. And like, you know, there's a very strong farming community and they'd go for that presentation, but my mom and dad weren't there. But no one knew my mother was sick because she didn't want anyone to know, because she had breast cancer a few years previously. And she found that very hard because people were almost avoiding her because they didn't know what to say. So now that she had the pancreatic cancer, she didn't want anyone to know because she wanted life to continue on as normal. So I couldn't tell anyone that my mother was dying. So I just had to go ahead. I did tell now one or two people I confided in Nuffield. But other than that, I swore them not to say anything. So I stood up, I gave my presentation, and everyone was like, wow, you know, it was very good, your report and everything. But everyone was like, where's your mom and dad? They'd be so proud of you. Where's your mom and dad? So I found that hard that day as well. But like, you know, in hindsight, but we'll say, so my mom passed away then, and she passed away the following Friday, on the 18th of January. And but on that day then, so I had to give the eulogy, I suppose, given the work that I'm in. I'm the loudmouth. I'm the one that stands up and talks and whatever. And like it was a lovely thing to do because, you know, it helped me reflect on growing up and all the bits and pieces that I would have taken and all the nice things. But like, it's something that now I think about on a regular basis. And it sounds a bit morbid, but like every day, well, maybe not every day, but I would regularly think, right, if I died tomorrow, what would people get up and say about me? You know, so, and I always think, you know, I mightn't be here next year. So like some people kind of say, geez, you know, Aisling, will you slow down? You know, why do you need to do? Especially like I joke often, like my husband to be kind of like, have we not enough on Aisling at the moment? Like seriously, can we just calm a bit down? Like, but I always think that I'm like, I mightn't be here next year. You know, and the lovely thing about my mom as well is when she was dying was she didn't want anything to change. That was a huge thing. Like she didn't have a bucket list. She got up every morning. She did everything she always did. And so it meant to me like that she was very happy in life. And thankfully I'm at that stage now where I look around and I kind of go, Jesus, isn't life great? Like I'm so happy now and where I'm at. But the other thing is, I suppose, with what happened with Mom, I know that we'll say that bad times come too, so that, you know, everything might be great now. And I think it's important to celebrate the good times. And even we'll say, you know, with the pandemic and people are kind of putting things off, you know, if someone turns 40 or 50, if there's a wedding anniversary, you know, my kids were 3 and 4 during the week. We still had our party. We didn't have the people there, but it's still important. There's no point in saying, oh, you know, there'll be plenty of other birthdays or there'll be plenty of other times, because you mightn't have those people there again. So I always say celebrate the good times because the bad times can come too.
I didn't know your mother, obviously, but listening to her about her and seeing you now, I think there's obviously a lot of her characteristics in you, and she'd be very, very proud of what you've done and are doing, Aisling. So
I hope so. I hope so, Tommy. Yeah. Well, it's the next generation, really. Like, you know, we say with Mom, like it's you know, I want to keep her spirit alive is a big part of it, and you know, I like to talk about her and I like to hear about her. And the same way, I suppose, for my own kids, like, so I've 2 girls and a boy. I'd have plenty more if I got away with it, but I don't think I'm going to get away with much more. But, you know, they're smallies, but like, they're like little sponges. You see that yourself, Tommy, like, and you know, you lead by example, and it's like, it's monkey see, monkey do. So like, even we'll say, you know, I've got back into trying to do a bit of fitness now and trying to get up and go for a run in the morning. But like now it's just natural to the lads. They're like, oh, where were you, Mammy? Were you out running? You know, so it's just, it's small things like that they kind of pick up on, and that you'd hope that you would inspire them. And that's a huge part of what drives me now is being a good example to them and being a good role model, because that's it. I don't know. Unfortunately, like, my mom died when she was 58. My grandmother, her mother, died when she was 40? Or no, sorry, she was 50. My own grandmother, her mother.
Yeah.
So in terms of the gene stakes, like, it's not looking too well, but it doesn't worry me. Like, I don't worry about it. But at the same time, I am kind of my eyes wide open to it, that I'm not here. I mightn't be here for a long time. So I'm going to pack as much in and enjoy life to the last, because you only get one run at it.
You've reversed it. So like, you could look at that as kind of being very morbid and saying, oh my God. But you've taken it, saying, every day I have a chance to do whatever I'm doing, whether it be business, family, work, farming. And you take that as an opportunity. It's like, that's why I wanted to talk to you. It's because of your wonderful attitude. I was in Tullamore one day, and excuse me, I was in Tullamore one day, and I was ordering my chicken fillet roll in a petrol station, and I noticed, I didn't know you obviously, but I saw you came in with your dad, and I was over, and I'm an observer of people. I like watching people, and the two of you were over at the newsstand, and you're having some conversation, and you could see that wonderful bond with the two of you. I went over and I was chatting to both of you, and your dad's a wonderful man as well. Just a great character and really dapper. That's the one thing about your dad. Every time you see him, he's incredibly dapper, isn't he?
Yeah, in fairness, like, my mom would have been the same. My mom was a great dresser, like, and like, not going out buying loads of branded clothes. She had a good eye for it. But I like, Dad tells a funny story. Like, we'll say when Mom was in the maternity and we were born or whatever, and you know, then the father comes in, like, but my mom would be like, make sure now you're well dressed, and make sure the kids are well dressed, and you know, that their hair is up and washed faces and blah blah blah. And like, it is very much that. It's like, it's showing respect. And it was showing respect for her. Like, so if he was coming into me, and if I was in maternity, he'd always wear a suit. Because it was showing respect. Or if he goes to a funeral, to this day, Dad would dress up like full suit, shirt and tie, and like, there mightn't be anyone else there, everyone else would be wearing anoraks, or you'd be mortified, like, you'd be walking in like Bill Clinton. But like, it is, what his thing is always, it's showing respect for the dead, and it's showing respect for other people, to dress well. But that's just, I suppose, that's his outlook on it. Yeah.
Understanding agriculture, you can kind of see from the conversation about your upbringing, where you are now, your business, that agriculture is so important to you, and Irish agriculture. So you obviously feel very strongly about that. And you set up a campaign, was it last year it started, called Understanding Agriculture? Do you want to tell people a little bit about that? Because you're somebody who's incredibly passionate about agriculture. What was the sort of origins, or the kind of the moment, or the moments when you went, I have to do something here, or I want to do something here?
There was two things really. One was, I was down at the Moore Park Open Day, and there was a farmers forum down there, and they were looking for feedback about, you know, from farmers about, you know, what was happening. Basically, it was predominantly dairy. Obviously, it was down in Moore Park. And the one thing that seemed to be coming up, we'll say, that was coming from the floor, was around, you know, the perception about agriculture and the way it was getting, we'll say, bad press. And it was something I would have been very aware of, having spent time in New Zealand. and that there was a big urban-rural divide, like that farmers were kind of seen almost like as the polluters, and not good carers of the environment, and that they were super wealthy and that they were doing that at the expense of the environment. And that was a huge thing in New Zealand that wasn't in Ireland at all. But I could see it creeping into Ireland. And there was even actually an Nuffield event, and there was a Nuffield scholar stood up, and they said and this is something that really resonated with me. And they said that basically he said that his child was ashamed to admit that her father was a farmer, and that she was getting taunted at school because her father was a farmer, and that he was a murderer and he was a rapist and all these different things. And I went, oh my God, this was a rural school. This was a school in a rural area. I was like, oh my God, is that what's going on now? And it's just because of the conversation that's going on, and predominantly, I suppose, like on posters and billboards, that farmers were being portrayed as murderers and as being inhumane and cruel, and it's so further from the truth, I feel, anyway. And the other side of it is, I appreciate that everyone is entitled to their opinion about this. I don't want to be ramming my opinion down other people's throats. But at the Moore Park Open Day, that was something that was coming up a lot. And I felt the reply back was kind of, just because Go Vegan World are going down that route with the posters, we're not going to go down that route, and we're doing X, Y, and Z. And I just felt, but I felt it's not really working. And then the other side, someone just did pipe up at the forum, and they said, well, why can't we put up billboards? I mean, farmers are the biggest landowners in the country. Why can't we put up billboards? And it was just something that stuck in my head, and I was like, I wonder. So it was something I researched afterwards, and I was like, okay, to put up billboards to promote farming and to promote what we do. And then another part of it is when I went to the ploughing match, right? And you go to the ploughing, and there's like thousands of people there. And only for farmers, there would be no ploughing match. Like, there's so many people involved in the ag industry that are, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, that were piggybacking off farmers, like in terms of, selling to farmers and providing different services to farmers, etc.
Hands up here, yeah.
Yeah,
people, yeah.
And only for farmers. But I felt that year, the ploughing, that little bit, that amongst all the ag industries, farmers were forgotten about. We've all these celebs, the plough match was awash with celebs, and it's great that it is that farming is we'll say, in the national conversation that week. But like a lot of the ag industries were bigging up the celebs that I would consider know absolutely nothing about farming, only were getting paid to be there for the day. And that farmers were almost being forgotten about. They weren't, and then you look at the likes of the McDonald's and the different food brands, and they're putting up farmers. You see Julian Hughes, they're up for Lidl and different. So I was kind of saying there was something that was amiss that didn't sit right with me. So I suppose, Peter Hines had coined the phrase, I don't know if it was Peter or Paula, down at that Moore Park Open Day, and they were saying that when people say about taking a baby calf away from their mother, how they explain it is to say, well, for the dairy cows to say, well, my mom is a working mom, and then for the beef cows to say, my mom is a stay-at-home mom. And it was something, again, that kind of stuck in my mind. So I said, okay, if the ag industry is not going to do anything about it, let's see if there's an appetite there. And so I launched a poster. I used that exact tagline. I got Tom Moore, who's involved in farming. He's down in Glyn, and he's a graphic designer, to come up with the poster for me. My own funds, I spent $8,500 in it, in terms of promoting it. I don't know, did I ever tell my husband that? But anyway, so I put out the ad on the national press, and then basically put a thing on the website for people to, if they were interested in getting on board. Basically, the idea is behind launching a billboard on your land, or some sort of a poster, or a positive farming message, and everyone will say putting it up on their farms. That's the basic idea behind it. And I was just blown away by we'll say, the interest that was there, and so many people were coming behind it. So anyway, fast forward, we've now formed a co-op. Lots of brilliant people on the co-op, and we've got funding from the Golden Jubilee Trust for €20,000 to further the campaign. So we're at the cusp now of actually, we've designed a couple of different posters. And we're actually putting it out to a focus group in the next, I have a call actually after lunch on it. And the idea behind it is that, you know, it's farmers advocating for farming themselves. So it's farmer run. That's, I suppose, the difference. It's not necessarily ag-related or marketing or anything like that. Yeah.
We're far removed from maybe farming. It's a brilliant concept. So what's the website if people are watching this and they're farming themselves and they want to get involved? Maybe it's their land is beside a motorway going from Cork to Dublin or somewhere like that. Where can they find out more, Aisling?
Yeah, it's just, if you just Google Understand Agriculture at the moment, I have it on my website, a page in it where you can register your interest. And also will say if anyone is kind enough to make a financial donation towards it. Yeah, if just Google Understand Agriculture and it'll bring you to the page.
Yeah, because it's one thing, and maybe social media polarizes the debate and maybe makes it worse. But I just feel like, as somebody who's in agriculture, again, very passionate, not afraid of change or not afraid of challenge around where we are. I think like farming's been tasked with the production of safe, healthy food for, you know, almost since the foundation of the European Union. Like, that's been the task. And now there's a huge debate around the environment, and it's like almost the whole thing's been flipped on its lid, and farming's the enemy, particularly livestock farming. So it's a really difficult time. Like, there was a program on RTE, I think I mentioned it before, another Ag Inspired, it was on something I didn't watch it, but you know, what seems to be missing is balance. And it's not like people in agriculture don't want to say we're doing everything right, but it's just a bit of balance, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. But like, I think part of it as well is that I think you have to acknowledge that everything's not perfect either in farming. You know, like sometimes like someone might come out and write an article, and I won't mention any names, but like they can be pillarized by the ag community. They can be like absolutely torn to shreds on Twitter. And I was just thinking about it recently. I remember someone that I admire is our we'll say Simon Harris. Do you remember when he became the Minister for Health? I remember like it was almost like the poison chalice. And he came out on day one, and you know, they were, I don't know, quizzing him about something in the HSE. And he put his hand up and he said, yeah, do you know what? That's not right. And he said, but my aim is, or my over the next number of years, is to improve that. And look, here's other stuff we're doing in health, which we're doing quite well, but here's stuff that we're not doing so well. And here's what we plan on doing about it over the next number of years. And I think something like that has to happen in agriculture. And I think it has to happen amongst farmers, that like, it's not all rosy. It can't be, like in any business, you know, because like there's always room for improvement with it. But I think until you kind of acknowledge, okay, there is good parts to it, but there might be not so good parts to it. There's always room for improvement there. But this kind of like going head to head with, say, us as farmers, it just doesn't make sense to me. So I think, you know, it's working collaboratively. It's, you know, figuring out like what are the issues, you know, and how can we address them. But at the same time, I think farmers need to be compensated. I don't think farmers are getting enough recognition for what they're doing, for all the you know, the things that they have to do in terms of the environment. You know, when you look at it, like, you know, things like hen harrier areas, like, you know, people were farming away for years. It was their land, it was valued at a certain value. All of a sudden you have a hen harrier designation on it. There's very little now that they can do, but they're not getting any compensation. There's no scheme there. Like, there's something fundamentally wrong with that as well. When you look at the rep scheme, like my mum was getting, I think, about 12 grand under her reps. And now we'll say under the glass, you're lucky to get 5 grand for doing more and having to do more work. So I don't, there's a little bit of a mismatch there. And if you're asking farmers to do things and to farm in a more environmentally friendly manner and to cut back on what they're doing, I think they need to be compensated accordingly. So yeah, that's...
When you mentioned Simon Harris and that idea that we're doing right and we're doing wrong and this is where we need to work, I mean, that's essentially probably leadership at a level, you know, it's just admitting to that everything's not perfect, but this is what we're going to do. Is there leadership in farming at a national level, or is it a job at a national level, maybe politically, or should it be done? Is it an individual thing, or is it a combination of both? Because I see it at the moment that really the conversations I'm having, and maybe that's the social circle I'm moving in, and maybe I'm biased, but the leadership seems to be coming from farmers deciding, okay, well, this is what's happening, this is where I need to move to, and it's an individual leadership thing that I'm seeing, and that's just my opinion. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's needed at an individual level, because like ultimately, like, you have to focus on what you can control. And I think farmers themselves can control their own land. They can control their own actions. I think I think we'll say with the advent of social media, I think more people are putting out content there now, individual farmers, where they're showing that, that they're taking steps to farm in a more environmentally friendly manner, or we'll say, and they're putting that up, and that people are then, that's where leadership is, and then people are following then as a result of that. But like, as I said, but I do think that farmers have to be compensated. At the end of the day, like the books have to balance, and it has to make sense. And like, I suppose, like, I haven't mentioned it yet, but a big part of when we were growing up, and it's a very important part to me today, is like, we've three principles in life. And we'll say quality of life, profit, and family farm of the future. So if we're making any decision here on the farm, we measure it according to those three principles. So in terms of,
say them again, Aisling.
So it's profit.
Yeah.
So it's quality of life is number one.
Okay.
So that if you were doing something, that you weigh it up, going, okay, is this going to, what kind of an impact is it going to have on our quality of life in terms of your work-life balance, kids, all that. Secondly, we'll say profit, because if something's not profitable, it's not sustainable, in my view. And then the other one is family farm of the future. So does it work towards, we'll say, encouraging the next generation into farming or into rural Ireland? So every decision that we make, we measure it according to those three different principles. So, in terms of a farming system, so that's where, like, if you're asking people to pull back in terms of their productivity, well, then that can affect the profitability side of it. So there needs to be a bit more done there. But I think it's within everybody's own power, and it's within their own control, to do all their own small, all these small actions will create a movement.
Those three things, I was taking them in, I was trying to remember them. I wanted to write them down there as you said them, because it's such, like, if something isn't profitable, it's not sustainable.
No.
And we talk about lots of metrics, but the metrics that matter are probably the quality of life, and then the future as well. What three? Like, there are three pillars any business could adopt.
Yeah, and I think they're so important as well, as in terms of encouraging the next generation into farming, because if you're missing any one of them, I think ultimately it might discourage kids into farming. And a lot of the time now, like, there isn't a profitability there in farming. And that's why the next generation, and like, they might see their parents, for want of a better phrase, killing themselves, working very long hours. So there's your quality of life, making very little return. There's your profit. So then your family farm of the future then is not there. Because they and that was the thing, would say that was something as well that I highlighted on the Ireland's Farmers Week. Like, that's the next thing that I'm very aware of, is that whatever we do now on the farm, that I need to bring the kids with me on it. There's no point in me and Brian being out killing ourselves doing X, Y, or Z on the farm, be it developing agri-tourism enterprises or out in the farm milking cows, if it's going to be at the expense of spending time with them. Like, fair enough, we can bring them with them, and nurture an interest in that, and a love for it and a grow for it. Well, then it ticks all the boxes for me, as well as making a bit of money as well. But there's no point in us going off on a solo run at the expense of spending time with them, because it kind of defeats the purpose, to my mind.
Aisling, I've taken up nearly an hour of your time already, right? So
not at all. I've been going on too long.
No. Like, and I could spend, actually, like, there's so much wisdom. We didn't even touch on your Nuffield. I don't think we gave understanding agriculture enough time. Your own farm. There's just so much happening with you, right? So if I'm a young person and I'm listening to you, I'll be quite inspired. And I think this is very important for me, is maybe sort of the younger generations of people in agriculture, whatever level of the industry, whether you're farming or in the industry. Like, how do you set up your day? Like, you know, how do you, when you're so busy, do you have a routine to follow? And I'm probably asking for myself now, because I can tend to be a very scattered person. But have you a set routine you follow every day? You mentioned exercise. Is there time for reading and learning? How do you set yourself up for your day and your week?
A bit haphazard, really.
Okay, but
because you know, with small kids, I know, but you know, with small kids, like, there's no such thing as a routine, really. Like, there isn't. I'd be blasé enough about it now, about routine. I kind of I just take it a day by day, really. Like, as I said, there's certain little things, all right, we'll say, like, I trying to do a bit of exercise now, get up here, like, whatever, around 6:15, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Depends on the weather as well. If it's absolutely bucketing rain, I'll do it on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And then, like, the kids, get up and, like, try and have breakfast with them. So Brian, my husband, he works from home, full stop. I work from home. So, like, we try to have breakfast, lunch and dinner together with the kids. They come out here, like, when they're finished school, they come out here to the office. We get the news at 12 o'clock in the office. And we sit down for 5 or 10 minutes and catch up. And then I'm normally in the office for somewhere between 8 and 9. It's kind of bedlam. It's like back to back, like 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, you know, Zoom calls, consultations, farm transfers. It can be a bit manic. It's very busy now at this time of the year anyway. So there's 5 of us working in the firm. And, like, I have a brilliant team around me. I wouldn't be able to do it for it. Like, friends, family, like, absolutely brilliant. And they're there for me, and I hope that I'm there for them too. And that was, we'd say, especially around, like, the pandemic. Like, I would have seen a lot of legal firms let staff go or put them on short time. Like, absolutely no way. Like, I do without rather than and put any of the girls that work with me on short time or whatever. I was like, let's look at other stuff. Like, if there's not work there, well, then let's look at kind of, you know, we're big into lean here. My husband is a big lean advocate. So yeah, I don't have any set structure. As I said, like, the kids are still quite young, like, just turned 4, 3, and I nearly have a 1-year-old. So we don't have matches or, you know, so I kind of go with the flow with them. I go with the flow, really. I'm the other way, like, I'm very laid back. Like, I'd say I drive people cracked because I'm kind of like, oh yeah, sure, I could be going down the road this way. And then I go, actually, no, we'll go the other way. So I'm very, very chilled that way. I don't have any structure as such. That's probably not the right thing to say.
You have a wonderful attitude, and you are very inspiring. I have to say that. And I know it was very hard talking about your mum, but I think it was nice to hear, you know, and see her influence on you. And I think she'd be very proud of you, Aisling. You're a wonderful advocate, I think is the word now, and I wish you luck with understanding agriculture. I leave the last words with you around, I suppose, your lessons of inspiration. What are you saying to, particularly, I suppose, you consider yourself a farmer first of all, even though you're doing all these other things as well. What's your message to farmers out there, particularly maybe younger farmers, about the future of farming? Obviously they've got to be profitable, look after their quality of life. What's your messages?
I think there's incredible opportunities in farming. I always, like, you know, I know we're in the middle of a pandemic and there's so much doom and gloom about, but I always, with things like that, like things like this, I think there's huge opportunities there. And it's to just take time out to think and to look. Again, I suppose I would have seen it, you know, from growing up with my mum and dad, like, they would have been one of the first, like, people with grass-based dairying, and that kind of set them apart from everybody else. And so I'm kind of, with our own farm now, I'm kind of like, I'm looking out going, what's the future? What is the future? What lies ahead? Like, what will the future look like? And it's to try and go in that direction before anyone else, and to try out new things. One thing I would say is, you know, for people to focus on what they can control. You know, there's so much happening out there in the world at the moment that we've no control over. Like, even things like, you know, like, I can see, like, I'm in different, you know, WhatsApp groups and different ag groups, and people can get very, like, you know, hot and bothered about what's going on in CAP or Mercosur or, oh God, Trump, you know, all that's going on in the world. But like, really, have we any influence in that? Have we any say? I mean, we give, you know, a certain amount of that we you know, to our politicians and to the likes of our agri industry, you know, and we hope they'll do the best job that they can. But ultimately, like, I think it's to focus on what you can control. And there's so much positive things in farming and agriculture and rural life. And I think the pandemic has been brilliant for shining a light on rural Ireland. And I think it will be very positive for rural Ireland in the long run, that people now are relocating and can work from, and it'll reinvigorate rural towns and villages.
I think rural Ireland is great as well. I think it'll always do well with people like you working in it and advocating for it. So I've taken enough time. I'm conscious baby Holly for the first time in a long time was awake all night.
No problem.
And had a conversation with me. I really appreciate it, Ashley.
Okay.
Keep up the
Thanks
great
a million. Thanks, Tommy.